Psychology, psychology for you. Welcome back then. Systematic desensitization part 2. So we'll just say systematic desensitization again. Well done. And in this part, obviously, we've looked at how systematic desensitization works, and now we're going to have to be able to evaluate its effectiveness using evidence, and to be able to evaluate how ethical it is. So even if it may work, is it a good thing to do to people who've got issues? Okay, so first piece of evidence is the evidence found by Kappa Fons. So you can have a look at that in the book. But that Kappa Fons was a good piece of research in that they found with people who had a fear of flying, not only did, I think it was 12 to 25 sessions of systematic desensitization led to 2 different pieces of evidence. So they let people, they did up to 25 sessions, and then when people were on a flight or a flight simulator, when you measured their physiological response, so measured their blood pressure and that kind of stuff, that was significantly reduced. So there was objective evidence that it had worked. And also when, after 25 sessions, when they were asked how they felt about flying, the self-report measures also suggested that systematic desensitization had made a difference. So that's a good piece of research supporting the effectiveness of systematic desensitization. An earlier piece of research in the 60s, Lang and Lazovic, they found that systematic desensitization was successful with people with snake phobias. McGrath, 1990, has also found it to be successful for a wide range of things, and 75% of patients with phobias have responded to treatment. So there is some fairly strong evidence that it works. Situations where it might not work, for example, maybe there are certain types of phobias that is not appropriate for systematic desensitization. So, for example, how could it work for a fear of death? That would seem to be quite a problem. Have a think if there are any types of phobia that systematic desensitization may not work for. Okay. Another issue about effectiveness is the idea of biological preparedness. So, so we've seen, haven't we, and so far when we've looked at phobias, that behaviorists say that it's come from an experience. People have learned to have a phobia of a spider or a snake or whatever. And if that's the case, then we can unlearn. So that would make sense. But the biological approach suggests maybe that we don't have to have a bad experience with a spider or a snake to have a phobia. And so that's led us to question whether all phobias really are learned. And Seligman, same Seligman who's responsible for the positive approach, suggests that in actual fact, what happens is that some phobias, we've got genes that get us ready to be afraid of something. Okay, so we're biologically prepared to fear things. So if we think evolution-wise, we might think, okay, why might it be good from an evolutionary point of view for us to be afraid of snakes and spiders, rats, heights, strangers, dead and decaying things? Well, clearly, if our ancestors were afraid of those things, they would be less likely to be bitten by a snake or fall off a cliff or killed by a stranger or catch some disease from a mouldering pile of rotting stuff. So maybe there's a suggestion that it would be that some phobias are quite helpful, and they were quite helpful in the era of evolutionary adaptation. Evidence for this is that there's a non-random distribution of phobias, and what that means is that not all that people aren't afraid of. There aren't 10 people afraid of snakes, and then 10 people afraid of staplers, and then 10 people afraid of something else. No, there are clusters of things like snakes and spiders that lots of people are afraid of. But not everyone has had a negative experience with the thing that they're afraid of. And Seligman did an interesting experiment with monkeys where he found it much easier to condition a fear of snakes and spiders into monkeys than to get them to be afraid of flowers. So that's fairly strong evidence that not all phobias are actually learned, which is a problem for the behaviorist approach, right? Another issue with effectiveness comes from a different angle. So if we can simply change someone's response to a stimulus, we're not actually dealing with the underlying cause of the phobia. And so what would happen is that instead of someone having a phobia of one thing, they might develop a different symptom. So we've actually developed a symptom. We've sorted out a symptom rather than the underlying problem. So, a fear of other people could be caused by an abusive relationship, and systematic desensitization might solve the phobia, but the actual underlying problem is still there. And that problem could re-emerge in another way. So maybe someone who's no longer socially phobic could develop a drinking habit, for example, or some kind of drug issue. The psychodynamic approach would have questions about this as well, because as you can have a look on page 55 and double check where the psychodynamic approach, how the psychodynamic approach explains phobias. But if phobias are actually to be found somewhere in the unconscious, then simply dealing with the symptoms in the way that we do with systematic desensitization would suggest that systematic desensitization wouldn't be effective. Okay, so we've got some good stuff on either side of the debate as to whether it's effective or not. So clearly it's effective in some areas, but there are also question marks about whether it can be effective in all of them. Okay, so now ethical issues. What do you think? Does it sound like an ethical theory? Do you think we're causing major harm to the client in putting them through this? Well, I mentioned it earlier. The other key behaviorist therapy for phobias is something called flooding. So if you had a spider therapy, for example, you could be flooding would involve being pushed into a room that's full of spiders and left there until you calm down and realize that the spiders aren't a threat. And so you can. So if any of you have got a spider phobia, you might think, oh, actually, that might be a bit of a traumatic experience, and maybe it could cause harm to people, and we've got to balance that against the fact that maybe an hour of complete terror or whatever, if it actually works and got rid of our phobia, maybe that would be worth, on a cost-benefit basis, maybe that would be worth going through that hour to be rid of a phobia forever. But compared to flooding, where the client is forced into this inescapable situation, yeah, that's a description of flooding, really. So if you are stuck in with a load of spiders, you can't be terrified forever. Your body actually has to let go, and you have to calm down. However, and Wolpe did this with a woman who had a fear of cars, and he drove her around for hours, and eventually she was fine. So the question then is really, what do you think is more ethical? Something that can seem quite traumatic and intense, like being covered in spiders for a while. Is that more or less ethical than something slightly more gentle than systematic desensitization, where you're working your way up through what we call the hierarchy of fear, as you'll remember? Okay. Other good question. What do you think would be more effective? I'll let you think about that one. And which one would you rather do? So any spider phobics out there, what would you rather do? Would you rather go through a few weeks or a few sessions of SD, or a quick hour of being immersed in spiders to see how it all works out? Given that it's for phobias, this therapy is not done for things like schizophrenia or for depression. Given that it's for phobias, then the participant or the client is able to provide consent. Okay, so the person is in a sound state of mind when they agree to the therapy. So that's a positive ethical point. So they can give full consent to get involved in the therapy. And also from an ethical point of view, as you know, as we were talking about flooding a minute ago, because this therapy moves at the client's pace, we don't move on from the picture of the spider until we're fully relaxed, and then we can think about being near a real spider. It's going to be less stressful for the client. Even so, some people argue that SD can still cause stress. So a question for you to think about, and I would pause the video at this stage and maybe get some ideas down. Do you think that the potential stress caused by SD is outweighed by the benefits? Just fully explain what you think. And to finish off, we've got a very strange phobia for you to look at here. Yeah, let's watch it now, shall we? YouTube's taking a little bit of time to load, I'm sorry. This could be it.
Pickles. I mean, the whole world eats pickles, but it's ruining her life. She's teased in school, and she, of course, in school was called a pickle girl. You know, once you know, this is what the sight of a pickle does to Mariah.
My name is Kyle. I hate pickles. I hate everything about pickles are destroying my life. People make fun of me. I feel ashamed. I'm afraid of them. I think about pickles. I just want to throw up and run away. What I hate most about a pickle is the shape, the texture of it, the color, and the...
We wanted to see firsthand the extent of Mariah's pickle phobia. So we sent her to the Patterson Pickle Factory, where she would come face to face with thousands upon thousands of pickles.
Okay, let's see. Let's listen to some of her thoughts on this. That was an attempt at flooding, by the way.
Stop shaking. And you're a waitress?
Yeah.
In a restaurant? Aren't there pickles around?
Yeah, but I'm nowhere near them.
You're nowhere near them?
No, I'm not, no.
What happens if somebody wants a pickle?
That's too bad.
Right?
It's too bad.
You won't give them a pickle?
Oh.
What do you say? What they say, I want a pickle. What do you...
Too bad we don't have any. If they want a pickle, they go back and get it themselves. I'm not getting them a pickle.
But you're the waitress.
So?
Shakia and Louise have confronted their phobia. They didn't like it. You're going to have to confront yours. You got to stay pickle.
No.
Can we have a pickle, please?
No.
Or two?
No.
Or 10?
Okay, it kind of carries on in that mode for a while. So it might be worth thinking, how might we help the women in that situation? Okay. So in order for us to just to check our understanding and make sure that we can put all our information that we've had over the two videos, so part 1 and part 2, like you to create a flyer for a clinic. So imagine you're running a behaviorist clinic that treats phobias with SD. You need to make a flyer with the following information. Okay. On Classroom, I'll put the original PowerPoint as well as this. Okay, so it'll give you more time to have a look at it. And it must be written in a way and this is often a good exercise, is to write something in a way that someone with no knowledge of psychology could understand, because if you can do that, then it shows that you understand it really well. Okay, and then if you could try the task in the exam corner on page 55, that would be excellent. Okay, well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.